Hello, Paul.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How you doing tonight?
Hanging in there, thanks.
That's good. That's good. Um, it's five after. Hopefully Eric will still join us, but we can start without him. So I'll call to order a Community Preservation Committee meeting for March 7th uh, on Zoom. Hopefully we have people joining us outside of the committee as well. Tracy, if you want to bring up Steve and whoever else may be with him.
Yep, I have Steve and Cindy.
Okay,
Steve, is there
right.
anybody else that I should be looking for?
No, it's just Cindy Matheson and I.
Okay, you're good to go.
Hi, Cindy.
Hey, Russ.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for
Good.
asking.
Good. And Steve, how you doing? I don't see you. Oh, there you are.
Over here.
Yep.
Well, and thanks to the entire committee for seeing us this evening.
If you want to start, whoever wants to start the presentation. My camera's not working, so you will not have the distraction.
Russ, your visage is seared into my memory anyway. So
Oh my God, your eyes are brown, aren't they?
what makes you think I meant that as a compliment?
It's true. That's true. I shouldn't have jumped the gun on that.
Anyway, yeah, seriously, once again, thank you for allowing us to come before the committee. But we come before you this evening recognizing your generosity over the last two town meetings is, well, frankly, it's unparalleled. And we're asking once again for additional funds for the trust. It comes at what we believe is a relatively important juncture for the Affordable Housing Trust, primarily because we have a number of initiatives underway and several that we would like to jumpstart. One of the areas that we've begun to explore is accelerating projects that otherwise might take a period of time for fundraising. And we can do that by simply using the trust as a guarantor on a construction loan. Now, at this point, I'm telling you about this as an example of some unique and creative ways that the trust fund can be applied. But from our perspective, we're in a bit of a foot race, and that foot race is to create units, not just to accommodate the 2020 census, but to recognize that by the time the 2030 census rolls around, the task will be that much greater. So we need to make headway now. And as you may remember, a good deal of our objective in initiating, or I should say reintroducing the Affordable Housing Trust from its original gestation, along with the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, was to take community management of affordable housing and drive that approach, as opposed to having it enforced upon us by a developer who could use the structures of 40B to bypass many of those things that we might otherwise hold dear in the community. So for that reason, we come before you this evening where our request is for additional funding to the tune of $500,000, $500,000. And we anticipate using those funds, as I just talked about, not only as guarantor, but also for subsidy stacking, potentially for fees that we anticipate will be required in a startup. We are actively interested in developing a lot that we're going to ask the town to transfer to us. So with that, let me stop there. Cindy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Can't possibly be more eloquent than you, Steve.
You like Russ's face too, right?
Absolutely.
So let me stop there and entertain questions.
Steve, how much now do you have in the trust? And then how would this funding, if we were to approve this, when would this funding, would it be transferred immediately? Would it be related to timing of projects, et cetera?
That's a very good question, Tom. The short answer to your question is that there is currently some $830,000 in the trust, and approximately $90,000 of that is committed. We have contingent liabilities. We've already committed $75,000 to the 808 Jerusalem project. We've committed another $15,000 to 147 South Main on a timed basis. We anticipate that the costs of administration of the trust annually run somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. That's primarily for legal fees at the moment. We anticipate those costs will rise a bit on an annual basis if we in fact need to pick up ancillary costs around projects. So short answer is unencumbered funds at the moment are roughly 725,000 from our estimation. The second part of your question is, can the funds be released on a timed basis? We're asking for your assistance. We're not trying to tell you what the rules are. We can use the funding in whatever way possible. And we recognize that we're not the only folks in town asking for CPC funding. So we're willing to entertain and work with the committee in whatever way is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you know, we don't have to point out the need for affordable housing in town and what happens if we don't hit it. And I think it would be nice if we can start. CPC has not created one affordable housing unit, really, in my opinion. We've gotten credit for 6 for the Tredis House, but those are counted as individuals because of the statute that they operate under. So it'd be nice to see some stuff start to come out as a result. So we're glad, or at least, you know, speaking for myself, I'm very glad to have been able to participate with you guys. It'd be nice to start seeing stuff popping up. But does anyone have a question, Thomas?
No, he addressed my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Russ, if I can butt in for just a second. Your point about the CPC's contribution to affordable housing is, you know, I recognize that you're looking at it from an absolute basis, but recognize from our standpoint that 808 Jerusalem could not proceed without, without additional contributions.
Mm-hmm.
808 Jerusalem will get $75,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust, which has a direct link to CPC.
Right.
So, you know, please keep in mind that, you know, that while you may not feel that the committee has a direct touch point to affordable housing units, without the committee, we couldn't be this far along.
No, appreciate
By the way, this far along to the attention of the entire committee, I noted earlier the idea of using the trust fund itself as a guarantor to the construction loan. This is an idea that we brought forward, have asked to bring forward through our planning director to the Habitat for Humanity. We recognize, we feel strongly on the trust that we need to show some physical gains in inventory. And an ideal item for us would be able to break ground on 808 Jerusalem sooner rather than later. I personally, not as the trust, but personally have had a conversation already with one of the primary local lenders who's entertained the idea and is extraordinarily positive about forwarding a construction loan to initiate construction as soon as possible, so long as there's a guarantor. We can be that guarantor.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see.
Steve, how would you feel if we went to town meeting requesting these funds, but with the understanding that they'd be released as you come up with projects, so that there is the authorization from the town to go forward, but the money is released on a project by project basis, rather than transferred to the fund itself?
Tom, it's a very good question. I'll give you the answer as I did prior. Any help you can offer is welcome. However, One of the things that we find immediately is that there are a lot of parties interested in affordable housing development in town. There are projects that are coming up. Some of them are going to come up because they're large enough that they're going to trigger inclusionary zoning. But there are others where folks are just simply asking, are you interested? And their first question is, if the answer is yes, is do you have any money? So the real question for us is, how much unencumbered funds do we have in the trust? Gene, I'm sorry to point you out directly, but Gene is familiar with a request that the Affordable Housing Trust has made to the town to transfer what is potentially a buildable lot to the trust. And the goal of the trust would be to sell that lot to generate funds, again, for the same reason. We anticipate, I have not published this yet, but we anticipate that to be an effective trust, we're going to need to build an unencumbered asset base of somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. And that, to be effective, simply means that we would be able to make commitments for any given project of substance. And that's, anybody here done any work on their house lately? Right? Prices have risen, right? The same thing. I mean, the original estimate that was put forward by Habitat for Humanity a year and a half ago was construction cost of $275,000. And we haven't had an update, but I would have to guess that would be pretty obsolete just on the cost of building materials.
I guess my question was really directed, and then I'll subside, but on where the funds reside before the projects. If they've been authorized by the town and we go and request that, then they're released on a project basis rather than being released just as a transfer from one holding station to another holding station.
Now, I understand your point, Tom, and again, we can't tell the committee how to run the business. And maybe there's a hybrid element to it that would allow us to take in some amount of that balance and the release of it based upon a project, or the release of the majority based upon a project. Or maybe we simply sit on our hands until there is a reason to move forward. However, the one thing I would like to avoid is having to wait for the next town meeting to transfer those funds. Okay, we're finding out, as everybody here knows, having lived in town, that if you're going to act on any element of real estate, you've got to be able to act quickly and decisively, and you've got to do it with funding available. And if we don't have that, if we don't have the time, the luxury of speed, and we don't have the necessity of funding, then we're not going to make a lot of progress. So, Jenny, you had your hand up.
I'm interested in the Habitat for Humanity project as maybe a nice neutral way to start, aside from commercial home builders. And what is your contact with them, or what has been your contact?
The trust actually doesn't have a lot of direct contact with Habitat. The trust is more of a funding source. That contact is both with the steering committee and with the planning director. Their typical way of approaching a project like this is to pass through their zoning requirement, get their permits, acquire the permits, and then raise funds. They now have a project that's ready to go. Now they're going to turn around and raise funds. And typically they do the fundraising within the community. This is going to be a unique element for them because the community here is, while we're wealthy, we're also relatively small. And they're going to be looking for large donations first. I don't know how long it will take. It can take a fair amount of time. I think they've maybe been optimistic in thinking that they can have their fundraising done within 6 months, in which case they break ground soon after. Under that scenario, I don't see a completed house there before probably late 2024. Or actually, 2 units. I'm not saying that as any expert in construction, just someone who's seen the practical elements of grinding it out. And if they would entertain the ability to initiate construction because they would have a construction loan guarantee and be able to backfill their fundraising, in other words, do their fundraising while the house is under construction, then, you know, it might benefit both parties particularly well. We would have 2 new units to add to the town rolls and a visible physical structure to point to as an element of success. So that's.
You did, do you remember the old Rotary building on Elm Street, just across from where I live? I think
Yeah.
Habitat for Humanity did that, didn't they, years ago?
Years ago, they
Yeah,
did.
they did.
Yeah. Seemed to be, worked fairly well.
It did. The difference between that was it's a pre-existing structure. Right? They
Yeah,
were able
true.
to, you know, and
True.
buy a deed restriction, renovate, and move
Yeah.
along. This is coming up from the ground.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying it's not. I mean, it's clearly something they're very capable of.
Mhm.
I'm looking at it from the perspective of time to market.
Mhm.
Okay, that's. I shouldn't say I am looking at it that way. The trust looks at it that way.
Thank you.
And this is our first opportunity currently to be able to initiate the project with Habitat for Humanity once again. So hopefully will lead to many more opportunities.
Mhm.
Susie?
Is this the
Jim.
Jerusalem, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is this the Jerusalem Road plot that you're
I
thinking
don't
of?
have any questions.
Yes. 808 Jerusalem is,
Okay.
there's a contract with Habitat for Humanity right now to be the developer of that property.
It seems so tiny when you drive by. Used to be the old library there. I went there as a child when I lived in Hingham on the upper floor, but it seems like a very small lot, but I guess it's buildable.
It is a very small lot, and frankly, it's simply because it's grandfathered based upon what was there prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that they're going to file for a comprehensive permit, which would allow for 2 units on that lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael? Mike?
I
Any
don't
questions?
have any questions. I'm all in favor of doing what we can to support affordable. So, you know, I'm all ears as to how we make this work and help. Help.
Okay. Thank you. Mary Ann? Mary Ann?
I don't have any questions right now. I'm just kind of mulling this all over and just looking that they have 500,000 and we gave I guess we gave 100,000 to affordable housing in 2017 and just kind of looking back at everything and just trying to pull it together right now.
And Mary Ann, your committee has been the benefactor. It was $500,000 last year. So we recognize that we're asking a bit, and frankly, we're hoping that we're hoping that the town will agree to transfer the buildable lot to us, which would provide additional fundraising, and we could actually go for a year or two without seeking more funds.
Mhm. Well, I think it's a good relationship to start with Habitat for Humanity as well, and to add additional units in the community. I'd like to see how we could do it. I guess I'd like more details on just, I guess I'm kind of thinking about Tom's thought about in parts to see how to execute that, not all at once, but I understand the need due to the economics of it. But I'm just thinking this through right now.
Yep, Right, no, if you need, if anybody in the committee needs additional information, please let us know. We're happy to come back before you.
Gene? You're muted. There you go.
Probably do that 30 times a day, but so I think Cohasset has a lot of demands on it, not just because of 40B, but now we're looking at potential new requirements relating to the zone surrounding the MBTA. And so that puts additional pressure on us, I think, to think through creative options on the affordable housing front. You know, I'd actually love to see us partner with some of the bigger CDCs in Massachusetts to really make a big dent. And I know, Steve, that you probably thought about this as well as you, Cindy, in terms of, you know, that sort of hybrid partnership to the extent that we can accelerate wherever possible. So ultimately, I would be in favor of giving them the flexibility that I think they need in order to really engage with potential partners, because a part, I think, of the dynamic in affordable housing, so I was on the board of one of these CDCs, is that you want to know that a town has committed. And the best way to show commitment in certain ways is through money. You know, put your money where your mouth is. If you care about affordable housing, then you give the trust the flexibility to do what it needs to do. You know, that said, I will just say that, you know, CPC in the town has a lot of other demands on it for these sort of money sources, whether it's this town hall project we have hovering sort of off to the side. And so a part of my only hesitation is, how does, you know, this request line up against other requests that we're looking at, and are we sort of looking at the big picture and responsibly managing it all? And so I don't have a great sense of the latter, but I'm supportive of the former, which is giving the Affordable Housing Trust the flexibility I think they need to be credible out in the market when looking for opportunities that I do think that the town needs to really start taking more seriously.
If I might, one thing that they can help accomplish, everybody knows we have a lot of other projects that are looking for funding. This is one of the only ones with our 40B numbers that if we don't hit, could result in fines or another large project in town. So I think that has to weigh in on it as well. You know, if we don't have enough we have all the historic preservation we want, but if we don't hit our 40B number, we're going to be behind the 8 ball. And I think that's one of the things that speaks in favor of helping them out now. Paul.
I'm taking a lot of it in, and I'm fully in favor of the Affordable Housing Trust. At first glance, I'm not for putting all the eggs in one basket due to the demands on the town. But I also agree with you, Russ, that we do want to reach that threshold. So it just, again, at first shot, I'd be in favor of parsing out the funds as, you know, things become guaranteed. So we are committed to reaching that level to get us over the threshold. But just to start, I'll have more questions down the road, but I am in favor, but I'm not in favor of putting all the eggs in one basket just at this time right now. That may change.
Would you look at favorably on putting part of it in now?
Yes, I would. Yes,
yeah,
most definitely. With some guarantees as you go along, then release the funds incrementally. Yeah, that was my point.
Okay.
I am in favor of that.
You know, because us funding them gives them flexibility that we wouldn't have on our own. We'd have to go to town meeting to get things approved, where they can act quicker. So you know, maybe the way we should look at it is part now and do another even special town meeting maybe, and hopefully by then we'll see some progress that can show that we're not throwing money into a hole.
That I'd be in favor of.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Susie?
I like the partial contribution at this point. And the odds are very good that if it all goes well, we'll have another town meeting in the fall. And CPC can meet before that and consider approving additional funding. In
So
other words,
are
I
you-
don't think it's absolutely necessary that we wait an entire year for the next slug of money to go to the fund.
So do some tonight and then other,
Yes.
whatever down the road, okay?
Yeah, I
Jean-
think that's a good way to go, but.
Okay. Jean, you had your hand up?
I appreciate where people's sentiments are on the partial funding. Another approach could be, and I don't know if this is viable, and Steve and Cindy, you tell me if this doesn't work, is that you could have the funding be relatively time limited, and if they don't use it, they lose it. And I don't know if that's a viable approach under CPC, but for example, if you said, okay, I'll give you 500,000, but you have to use it by the end of the year, and if you don't, it reverts back into the CPC funds for
Oh.
consideration for future projects to keep it on a tighter schedule.
All of our articles have a sunset date. So,
So
yeah,
that could be another way of trying to manage the concern of it sitting out there not being well used.
no, that's standard procedure with our grants. They have a certain amount of time. Usually go by whatever. I mean, most projects have a definite start and an end date where Steve and Cindy are sort of, they're ready to jump when the thing makes itself available. Where other ones, will say it's going to take us 6 months or 9 months, and we'll give them a year to finish it. But okay, Paul.
Just to follow up to that, what you just said, Russ. So if they're ready to jump,
Mhm.
and it's not that difficult to have another CPC meeting. We release the funds as they go. When they're ready to go, then we're there to help. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, yeah, but the thing is if we give them money tonight, say, if we need to increase that, we'd have to go back to town meeting and get town meeting to approve it. I'm not sure, and I can check it out with Don and Chris, whether we can make well, I guess in a sense, it'd be sort of like we're doing with the swim club, or any other project. As they go along, we're releasing funds to them.
That was my gist of what I was getting at.
Okay, okay.
What
And
I
that would
would-
be a workable solution. I'm sorry, Tom.
No, that's right. What I was suggesting is that we go to town meeting and ask for authorization for $500,000, the amount they've asked. But we
Right.
release that as they come with projects. So it's pre-approved by the town, but brings us into some sort of partnership and provides an incentive for them to
Sure.
come back and report. So not that I think that's needed, but it would also, I feel a little uncomfortable pouring $1 million into the foundation over the last couple of years, and not much has happened, at least to the naked, the detached people. So this, it would seem to me, provides some continuing involvement. But
Yeah.
it clears the hoop that they don't have to wait until the next town meeting and something else. We express in principle our support of what they're trying to achieve. It's simply the mechanism of distribution.
Yeah, it'd be very much like, any of the projects we do where we hold the money, they bring in receipts, we release it.
Exactly.
And I mean, you've got enough in your kitty now to get the ball rolling on stuff. Would something like that cause any timing or problems that you can think of, either Steve or Cindy?
I can't foresee a problem where, the initial request this evening for $500,000 is really in light of focusing on the target balance that we would like to have the trust hold. And the basis for that is to give us the ability to act quickly, decisively, and entertain what we anticipate to be some fairly large dollar projects.
Mhm.
So I would respectfully request that in your considerations, that some amount of money be released immediately during, at the committee's discretion. We're perfectly all right coming back to you on a, for lack of a better phrase, an off-cycle meeting, one that doesn't require an additional visit to town meeting, to let you know that with regard to the additional funds making up the total balance, we have the following needs, and let you vote on it from there.
Right. Well, that's what Tom is suggesting.
Right.
I believe, I hate to keep repeating, just like other projects, but we would set aside X number of dollars with a certain amount released now, and the rest not on receipts, because you're not going to have receipts, but as the need may rise. So we can do it that way. I think there's agreement with everyone on that.
I think that the one thing that I want to make sure that everybody in this meeting recognizes is that in what we're finding out pretty quickly is that in demonstrating the commitment to affordable housing from the community's end of things, the trust balance becomes important. But to anybody who's interested in working with us, recognizing that it's going to be within the confines or the boundaries of Cohasset, it starts to add up pretty quickly. Let's see, land cost, construction cost, et cetera. I guess my point is that it's ironic and embarrassing to say this, but you've actually got to show a fair amount of money to be able to build affordable housing.
Oh, yeah, that's always been something I've asked it with people at the state. How do you build affordable housing in a community where your single family prices are close to, if not over, $1 million on average?
Right, and the corollary that we're seeing to that is how can you say that you are committed to this when your balance is in six figures, not seven?
I think I sense that everybody on this committee so far that has spoken is supportive of the objective. What we're really talking about is how do we structure it? And
Right.
I think if you can say to people, we have $725,000 in the trust, we have authorization from the CPC for another $500,000, So, or let's say we do less than 400, withhold less than 500 and give you so much, which would bring you up to $1 million or something of that nature. So it's just a question of continuing involvement in CPC is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Right, no, I understand, Tom, and again, look, whatever the committee decides, we're going to work with. All right, those are the marbles. At the same time, I'm giving you my wish list, and Cindy's is longer than mine is. So.
Cindy, you had your hand up.
Just to say, in terms of the background, because Jean hit on this earlier. I mean, this just very generally, the state has encouraged towns to set up affordable housing trusts to give the town a leg up in competition with the marketplace for development of lands that come up. If we're having to wait every time to move through town meetings to have the credible resources to move on something, nothing will happen, because there will always be someone from the private sector able to move into that much more quickly than we would be able to. So the idea of having a large amount of unencumbered funds to move quickly when the opportunity arises is at the crux of why affordable housing trusts were created to start with.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. What do you have for a balance now?
Just Russ, Paul Grady's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
I was just listening to Cindy for a minute, and then Russ, you were about to parrot my question about what you have on hand right now. Could you tell me the balance again of what you have on hand right now?
The gross balance at the moment is $833,000.
Okay.
And then we have contingent liabilities against that. We've got a commitment for 75,000 going out to Habitat for Humanity, another 15,000 to the developer at 147 South Main Street. And we anticipate between $25,000 and $30,000 annually in expenses primarily for legal services. And to the extent we need engineering, that's our best guess.
Okay, so thank you. I don't think you're in a bad spot right now. I mean, we're gonna release funds, I'm assuming. We're all in agreement on that. But again, on a partial basis, when you come up with something that you're committed to, you do have the funds to start immediately, I would assume. And then you're getting a further commitment from CPC tonight, I'm gonna guess, and then even down the road, so that balance is there. It's just not all sitting in the bank as we speak.
There's a balance there that is probably sufficient, and it's best estimate, probably sufficient to handle one or maybe even two small projects at a time. But if we are fortunate enough to have more than that in percolation at the same time, then we will be stressed.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Steve. And that's what I'm saying. We're going to release funds this evening, and again, I'm going what Tom was saying as well. If it comes out, I wouldn't say incrementally in a third, for instance, but that money is there for you guys. And that's, I think, what we were getting at least that's where my line of thinking is going, that you will have access to the funds.
We appreciate your support and your continuing support, and your method of structuring it. We will work with.
If we were to recommend 500,000, with 300,000 being released after town meeting approval, then 200 held pending projects being ready to consummate. Would that hinder you in any way?
I would hope not. I would hope not. Again, I remind the committee that we are proposing, although the selectmen have not taken a position, nor has advisory committee taken a position on it. We're proposing the transfer of two properties to the trust, one which could raise funds, the other one which we hope to develop. Which would be additional funding for us. And again, the goal behind this is that the trust recognizes the need to expedite our activities. And it's taken us the better part of a year or so, year and a half, to get our feet underneath us. And just as importantly, it's taken that same amount of time for the steering committee to actively promote individual projects. So we're effectively at that nexus where we anticipate needing a continuing flow of funds. What you're proposing as a release of funds makes sense, and frankly, it works beautifully from our standpoint. If, as I said, we're hopeful, but if we get the approval from the selectmen first, and then from the town meeting. To transfer those properties, well, that puts us in an extraordinarily much stronger position. Okay. Look, we are so far ahead of where we were the first iteration of the Affordable Housing Trust. There are times when I look at it and feel giddy. The original Affordable Housing Trust was floated, if I remember correctly, sometime in the early 2000s. Yeah. It had full membership for about an hour and a half. It had partial membership for a couple more cups of coffee, and it never had any funding.
Right.
And short of several pretty loud arguments, not much got done. Yeah. And it wasn't because there was a lack of desire. It was because, frankly, there was a lack of structure and no directed funding mechanism. So right now, we're far ahead of the game. We've got a we've got a project going into permitting, counting 390 CJC, a couple of other projects that we are very clear on. we're getting close to adding a substantial number of new units. Having said that, those are the units that count against our quota or against our requirement for the census. That doesn't begin to touch the numbers of units we actually need for the purposes of true affordability.
Okay. Jenny?
I don't understand why we couldn't do the 500,000 if they're only going to take it out as projects occur. And, they could, what's the difference between that and them coming, if we authorize the whole thing, but only give them 300,000 right now, but then they could come back in 2 months and say, well, we've got a project that we need. Why not just authorize the whole 500,000?
Tom?
Can I respond to that? I think, since it's my idea, that I think the CPC has a responsibility to account for the use of these funds. And I think the trust is great, but I think that we also have a responsibility to see how those funds are dispersed and for what kind of projects. And I recognize the need to provide some sort of real credibility to the building and funding communities that the trust has. So I'm trying to forge a partnership in which we continue to have our responsibilities met while they meet theirs. And we will have put in somewhere around $750,000 to $800,000 into this effort, into the trust. I don't think it's unreasonable to hold on to a portion of that to show that we are active partners in the process. It has nothing to do with not supporting the project. It's a question of how to support it.
If I may, Tom, I hope you recognize that Cindy and I are quite willing to accept terms that are proposed by the committee. And if the committee would prefer to hash this out on their own, as opposed to in front of the trust, that's quite all right as well. We recognize that there are a variety of opinions. I can tell you what we would like, but I don't believe it's our role to lobby the CPC as to how it manages its funds.
I'd like to see us come to an agreement tonight. If for no other reason than our meetings are public meetings and you guys are the public as well. So whether we hash it out in front of you guys formally or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I would entertain a motion to set up something and get that going tonight. Just my opinion. Jean?
Steve or Russ, can you remind me what the existing funds that I think were committed last year from CPC and the trust? Is there a sunset clause for those funds? And will there be a sunset clause for these funds, or are we just donating them in perpetuity? Or not donating, allocating, sorry, that's.
Yeah.
I don't believe that there was a sunset clause last year. And as I understand it, the rough discussion that I'm hearing would indicate that while there'd be an authorization for as much as $500,000, there would be a requirement to move forward. I did hear, I think it was Russ suggest that there can be a sunset clause on the unused portion. Again, we're willing to work with the management that the committee wishes to put on the funds.
Does anybody want to try to work? Susie?
If we were to approve the 500 with the idea of once it's okay by town meeting, to immediately distribute, say, $275,000 or $300,000, how would that vote come through? Not only for us, but at town hall, since we aren't planning on giving the whole 500 immediately. How does that work? We vote the 500, it goes to town hall. We hold back a couple of hundred until such time as there's a demonstrated need for it? Is that how does it work?
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, it works just like any other project. It'd be, in this case, it'd be whatever amount up front. And as it becomes necessary contractually or whatever, the rest could be dispersed. And we could have as long as a 2 or 3 year sunset on it. By which point, hopefully there would be through the money.
All right, and that would be in the vote at the town hall.
Yeah, it'd come off of our balance of available funds. Just like any of the other projects that aren't complete yet, we'd have money held in reserve.
No, Russ, I understand how it would work. My question is, how do we vote it? And what ends up on the warrant?
We would vote X number of dollars with X to be released immediately.
Okay.
The remainder as funds are required. Paul?
Thank
So
you.
if we wanted to tonight, Russ, say we could vote, hypothetically speaking, release 250, which should knock what you have on hand for the Affordable Housing Trust, just about up to about $1 million, give or take, less funds that are already allocated. So that's a nice chunk of change to put in with a further promise of 250 when we see some progress or some commitment to some project that is going to bear fruit. But that, to me, gets people where they want to be. And as Tom says, it keeps us in a bit of a partnership with affordable housing, but it gets your balances up to where you want them to be. It's a serious amount of money. So we could do that figuratively, right, Russ?
Correct.
I don't see anything wrong. I don't see anything wrong with that at this moment, but it also keeps our finger in the pie.
Right. Mary Ann?
Russ, on the warrant, do you have to explain the conditions of why we are holding back perhaps 200,000? If you say, or do you say we're providing it for a full 500,000 and then and the conditions of why do you explain why that there are conditions on this in the warrant?
That I'd leave to town council to answer, honestly. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to.
To say that we are.
Yeah, we're releasing X numbered now. The balance to be expended as not as the need arises, but some pin it down somewhat. We got a couple lawyers on the board. Mike, how would you do it?
Not quite sure off the top of my head, Russ.
Okay.
Russ,
Gene?
why would this deviate from the way we traditionally do funding? That we get authorization and then we release the funds as we get the bills and the project goes forward. This would be the same kind of thing.
That'd be the easiest way.
Because we're not going to divert these funds. We've committed them to these purposes.
Right.
Okay, well then that's so on the warrant then, Thomas, you wouldn't have to explain how you're holding back some of the funds. You would just say we're releasing it, but you don't have to give specifics.
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't pass judgment on that. But my feeling would be this would be consistent the way we give out funds, that we authorize, we get the authorization for the total amount and we disperse them as the project progresses. So, we'd have to check with town council, but I don't see why this would be fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I needed to understand then. Okay.
Steve, do you need those funds actually held in the fund, or would it be in the trust? I'm sorry.
Yeah, which funds are you asking about?
I'm talking about if we were to authorize, say, $300,000 to be paid immediately, and the other two we hold back until there's some demonstrated reason to release them. Would you be able to go forward and say we have 500? Or would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
As I understand what you're proposing,
they don't need to be actually in your fund for you to rely on them.
The full amount would not need to be within the trust for us to represent accurately that we had a commitment of $500,000.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, plus,
So long,
don't-
so long as the vote at town meeting authorize that commitment.
Yes. Okay.
Okay?
and you know, when we get a bill or a request, don't labor under the misconception that it could take them a long time to get that money. When Don gets a request, it's usually paid the same week, the next week at the latest. So the money would be able to move pretty quick. And I think quickly enough to satisfy anybody they may get into a contract with. So, somebody want to make a motion? Paul?
I'd make a motion to approve the immediate dispersal of $250,000 with $250 held in reserve until projects to reach fruition or if the bills are presented to the CPC.
I would second that.
All right. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. We have to do a roll call, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jean,
Jean Haley Dippledy.
Michael,
Michael Dickey, aye.
Mary Ann,
Shut up.
Marianne Weatherald, aye.
Tracy, what you're gonna say?
I'm all set.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Paul,
Paul Grady, aye.
Ginny,
Jenny Najmi, aye.
Susie,
Susie Wadsworth, aye.
Thomas,
Tom Reardon, aye.
and I'll join the crowd. Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, Jean,
Just one quick question. I don't know if we did this previously, but I'm looking at the CPC's website, the CPC Coalition, the subject matter experts in Massachusetts, and they recommend a grantee agreement whenever transferring funds between CPC. So Steve, I don't know if you've already done this, but that might be something we need to further look into to make sure everything's wrapped up.
We have not executed one up to this point, but that, you know, so long as you don't want my first child, well, actually, she's 34. You could have her.
Good.
Okay,
Let us know what you'd like to do about that. We haven't executed one, but if it's in the best interest of CPC to do that, then let's we'll take a look and entertain it.
I thought there had been one because they had said that they set it up according to the CPC guidelines back when Paul Durenzis was the counsel.
We did, I believe, sign an acknowledgement. I don't know that there were any conditions attached to it, which is what I thought he might be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's no problem getting one done. I just figured if we already had one, we'll check with Chris and see what there is. No sense doing it twice if we don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Once again, Cindy, I'll turn it over to you. Any last commentary?
Nope, just a lot of thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, every one of you.
All right, thanks.
Welcome.
Say hi to Paul, Cindy.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, what was next on the agenda here?
Historical Society.
Historical Society. And Glenn?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening,
I thought you
everyone.
were on an airplane tonight.
No, I thought the meeting was Tuesday night, so I'm.
Okay.
But I do have to jump off fairly soon. But I have Marie Schlegg, Vice President of Society, who is here to explain what our request is. And it basically is that we have at the Historical Society come to the realization that in order to stay relevant in the museum world, we need to digitize our vast collection of archives and documents. So she'll tell you all about it. Marie, you start.
Okay, Glenn, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Marie Schlegg, as Glenn said. I'm a retired textile conservator, so I'm using my talents over as a volunteer at the Society to currently take care of the textile collection. I'm also on the board, so I'm aware of what's going on with other parts of the Society.
Marie?
But I will focus tonight.
Marie, If
I'm
I could
sorry?
just interrupt, if I could just interrupt you for a second, can you
Sure.
state your name and address for the record, please?
Certainly. My name is Marie Schlag. I live at 91 Tilden Road in Situate.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. So what I'm going to do is focus tonight on the digitization portion of this for this grant. I'm part of the digitization committee. So I'll begin with telling you that the Society uses a database for its collections known as Past Perfect, which is utilized by many museums and historical societies. Actually, over 125 museums in the state of Massachusetts alone uses this particular platform. But currently, it can only be used by the in-house staff at our headquarter buildings at the building on South Main Street. So we cannot work from home. We cannot go into another one of our sites at the Maritime Museum or the Wilson House or the Beechwood Museum and use our big database there. We can't access because it's locked into the server on South Main Street. So we take pencil and paper, we go to these other sites, we make notes, and then we have to go back to the headquarters building and put that and enter that data into our database. So it's very time consuming, it's labor intensive, and it's just not working for us very well. So the current version of our Past Perfect database prevents us from doing those things as I mentioned. The Society's holdings include artworks, photographs, documents, maps, many Gilbert Tower maps, and a major 4,000-piece textile collection. And under the current circumstances, only a small fraction of our holdings can be exhibited at any time. And that is the only point of access that the public has, is when we exhibit something. So due to the lack of an online public face to this extensive collection, it basically remains silent to the residents of Cohasset, the surrounding communities, to our teachers, researchers, scholars, and parents, particularly those parents who are homeschooling or those parents who had to reinforce lessons during homeschooling due to the pandemic. Without public exposure to its collection, a museum lacks relevancy to those aforementioned groups. Creating a digital library for the Society's archives and collections will serve a diverse online community and create a point of access to the Society's collection. So online access would also allow access to our collection for visitors to look at and learn about specific objects of interest, learn about our current exhibitions, read transposed diaries, letters, and documents of importance, as well as view many of the objects in our textile collection, including clothing and accessories, quilts, and military memorabilia. The public access link to our collection will be a link on our current website, and the Society will market its launch on Facebook and Instagram platforms on which we already have a presence. We'll also market that launch on the homepage of our website. As a member of the Digitization Committee, we have compared available cloud-based programs and have agreed that staying with our current database, Past Perfect program, and upgrading to its cloud-based version, which is known as Web Edition, and subsequently adding on a public access piece will enable the Society to not only open our collection to the public, but also give the staff and volunteers the ability to work at home and to interface with the software from the other locations that our museum holds. Over the past 6 months of planning, the committee has been working with Past Perfect by having them review our data and make recommendations for a smooth migration over to Web Edition. Past Perfect has made recommendations, and we are acting on those recommendations. And we are getting close to the point where we can begin to migrate this data over to the cloud-based version. For the beginning stages of the project, we have chosen large format documents that are to be scanned by Inception Technologies, and these include large maps, mostly large maps. We're working on in-house scanning of small-scale documents such as letters and diaries, photographs, and other small format documents. We're preparing to photograph objects and textiles, which takes a very long time because each one has to be mounted properly and positioned in light boxes and up against backdrops. These scans and photographs are and will all be added to the current database and will be moved to that cloud-based program when the migration is complete. Once we are comfortable with this new web edition, the public access piece will then be added on shortly after, within a couple of months. It will be initiated by a link that PastPerfect will create for us. We then take this link and attach it to our website under a Search the Collection button. And that will allow the public to click on that button and access our collection online. So by visibly connecting the public to Cohasset's past, we will remind its citizens of the responsibility we all hold to be stewards of Cohasset's history. Any questions?
Mike, just out of interest, do you have any idea as to what kind of traffic or user numbers you're going to get?
Gee, not at this point. I really believe that's going to depend on how well we market. And if we currently are on Facebook and Instagram, and I believe we're up to a few hundred followers on Instagram at this point. But that is simply, I would say, by sheer luck. We have to do a little updating to our website, really push it out the front door of that website that we now are online, as well as Instagram and Facebook, which will probably reach a lot more people that way.
One of the other important parts of the project is that we have to digitize our archives. They as they get older, they get more frail and harder to use and access. So as all museums are starting to do now, it's digitizing as much of their archives as they can. And that is the basis of the project. And the other thing Maria is talking about is that all the good things that it allows the public to do with our collection that we've been gathering up for almost 100 years.
Paul?
Personally, I think it's a pretty neat idea. Preserving the past, protecting the future. I think it's well thought out. It's a nice thing if someone wants to research Cohasset. So it's an interesting thing you just brought up. So thank you.
Susie?
What are the other grants that you've applied for? I'm a little concerned with, one thing, opportunity costs. If we were to finance this, what other projects do you see coming down the pike? For example, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a question about the condition of the cupola. I don't know if that's been resolved. Also, going forward, there's $25,000 every year. How do you plan to finance that? In other words, if you start something without enough funding to complete it, how does that work?
Well, we believe that it most likely is a 10-year project. It's a massive undertaking, thousands and thousands of pieces of documents and photos and descriptions and those kind of things. So for this year, we have the other funds budgeted in our budget, and we are, as Marie said, underway. And we're hoping for a boost from your committee. And then each year, we will ramp it up as fast as we can procure funds or even staffing to do it. It's very labor intensive. So it's underway. It's a long-term project. So I don't know whether that's the answer to what you were trying to ask about.
No, that's fine. But how else do you plan on getting the money? In other words, there are grants available out there. Have you applied for grants for this?
Right.
And if so, where do we stand?
we have somebody who is concentrating on grant writing now. And also, the more we become in the public eye and become relevant, the easier it is to get donations and qualify for these grants. So we're in early stages, but the board is committed that this is a must-do if we're going to remain relevant as we go forward.
If you were to just upgrade to the cloud-based Past Perfect, how would that work for you?
That would assist the staff and the volunteers at the Pratt building to work from home or to work from another location that we own, but that's it. There'd be no public outreach whatsoever.
And what would it cost to get the public outreach part of it?
The public outreach part of it is an additional $300 per year for the annual hosting.
That sounds perfectly reasonable.
That's only the public access piece. It does not include the migration from our current, we have a database called Past Perfect 5. When we move to Web Edition, we will be paying $300 for a one-time fee plus an additional $700 a year for annual hosting.
Tom?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to follow up on Susie's point, Glenn, do you envision a 10-year relationship with CPC to fund this?
Not necessarily, no. We know that it's something that the society has to do, and we're committed to fund it from various sources. We're not relying on CPC to be always a partner for 10 years.
Thank you.
Ginny?
Yeah, I wonder if you are trying to create a model that will carry you forward to get more funding. For example, I notice you don't include your three-dimensional artifacts, which happen to probably be of the most interest to, say, school children and others. If you were to have somebody help you curate so that you take the 100 best of your prints and paintings, the 100 best of your artifacts, the 100 best of your interesting documents or whatever, or textiles that go through the collection. You might be creating a model that will make it much more attractive for other funding sources, mass historical or humanities, art.
Right. We think that that's exactly what will happen as we roll it out. And the digitization committee has worked many hours getting to this point, and like I said, the board is committed.
Yeah, I think, if you take this first year as an opportunity to create your model that you can then present to other granting agencies, that will relieve a lot of the pressure on you. And also, who is curating the objects to be selected? I'm assuming you're not trying to do every single thing at once. You're doing your most important things first. Who is doing that? Do you have in-house expertise to do that? That's another thing that outside grants could help you get too.
Right. I'm going to let Marie explain how we're approaching it and how we're selecting those items. But I do apologize. I have an incredible conflict. I have to jump off right now, but I'm sure Marie will be able to continue on. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks, Glenn.
Virginia, to answer your question, the committee consists of, I believe, 5 or 6 women, many of whom volunteer. One is our curator, Lynn Giacomo, and under her supervision, we've decided to partition the collection between us. So there'll be myself, I'll take myself as an example. I'll be selecting 15 costumes, for instance, every month. So that by the end of the year, I have 150, 200 photographed and on the website to be for the migration. Someone else will be doing artwork. Someone else will be doing archives. Someone else will be doing hard objects, which we will be including 3D objects. And so every month we have this commitment to get this done. And by that, I mean, we upgrade our record, make sure everything's perfect, and we have a photograph installed. So that, and then what we do is we actually only have to click a button and that moves it over to the online site. So we can continuously add to that online collection. And this is why it's going to take many years, because there are 40,000, 50,000 pieces in the collection. It's just huge. So, and we'll only pick the cream of the crop at the beginning.
I'm wondering
Does that answer
now.
your question?
Well, yes, I recognize that you have special expertise in textiles. I'm wondering if the other volunteers have any specific knowledge and training to select objects and documents for.
Well, I certainly know that Lynn does. And it's under her supervision that the other people are making the selection. She will have the approval. They're not going to just.
But do you have any historians working with you, or
not to my
or
knowledge.
anyone to offer? I assume that each of these objects and documents is going to have some kind of an identification and a little bit of interpretation.
Yes, it will.
Description?
That's what a
Yeah.
record consists of. Yes.
Okay.
It dates it. It has description. It has provenance. And we do have interns that are assisting us with deep dive provenance work. So there'll be a lot of information on the records.
Much easier with the internet, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
answering my questions.
Certainly.
Anyone else have a question?
I have a comment. I think it's great that you'll be able to go online and see a good portion of the collection. What troubles me is that doesn't mean the same as going in and actually seeing the objects. And one of my issues with the Historical Society is very, very few items are on display. So if you go in, you can go in at certain times of the year if there's a special event happening or a special display. But none of the objects are permanently on display. Are there any plans for that? You've got, the budget is enormous because you've got 4 buildings, but you don't have any real foot traffic, and especially now because the Pratt building hasn't been open very much. Do you see my point? It's great to have it online, but if you can't go in and actually see
Yes, I do.
I have trouble with that concept when it's a museum.
Yeah. Could I make a suggestion?
Well, obviously, we've been close with it.
Yeah. When I walk into the Paul Pratt Memorial Library, the library has become the museum. You really need to take out all of those bookshelves, except maybe some on the perimeter of the room, and create some good exhibition space in there. Because not everything, or very few things, can really be displayed adequately on shelves like that. I think the room, you just have to harden your hearts and empty that room. Keep some of the things on the perimeter, maybe for collections that are permanently on display, small items and so forth. But that's a real lack of flexibility in the building right now. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
That's okay. As a textile collection manager and with a huge exhibition planned for the end of the year in early January, I completely hear what you're saying. It's very difficult to put up dress forms, for instance, with those bookcases in place. Right now, we do have an exhibition on open. It's called, I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact name of it right now. It begins in the rotunda and pushes onward into the room to the left. And it's an example of objects found in the homes that are in the 250 historic homes. So that's been open since November. And because the building was closed with due to the pandemic, and then it ebbs and it flows. And when it ebbs, we're open. When it flows, we're closed. So that's there. And it has been put on Instagram and Facebook. And people are invited to come. But certainly, we're not getting a lot of foot traffic because of the Omicron variant. The putting things online, putting the collection online only encourages people who perhaps are stuck at home or curious about something to come in and see. You can actually come in and request to see an object if you need to, or a document. And there'll be a place on the website where you can request an appointment to come in and do research, to come in and see an object, etc. I think it's going to encourage people to come more when we do have an exhibition open. We don't have a lot of space in the Pratt Building right now. So to have a large exhibition currently on display is not always feasible. Plus you have a time limit, you have environmental factors such as light and heat, and visitors and dust. So you can't keep things going for a very long time. You have to rotate your exhibitions. There's current exhibitions over at the Beechwood, which again, because of the pandemic, does not have regular hours. And the Maritime, weekends only, I believe, at this point. The Wilson House is under the process of being recreated and reimagined, and we hope that'll be open perhaps by the end of this year or prior to the end of this year. So the Pratt Building, yeah, doesn't have a rotating exhibit because of the past 2 years, but we're hoping to change that. I hope that answers your question.
Mary Ann?
Hi, I think this project fits nicely into the CPC's historic preservation criteria. So I do like this. I just wanted to clarify that the request is for 80, I think it's 8,500 for this initial for 2022. So then going forward, you'll probably have a relationship going with us. And that's what's outlined here is the 25,000, 30,000, 30 for the next 4 years. It is. I had a question regarding the Past Perfect Web edition, which I think is great to upgrade your database since it seems to be preventing any work from being accomplished during COVID. Will your scanning equipment also have to be upgraded soon as well to be compatible with Past Perfect Web Edition? Because it seems like you're relying initially on Inception Technologies, but eventually that will have to come in-house.
Yes, we do have.
Will that be a big upgrade? Will that be a big upgrade? I'm sorry.
We do have in-house scanning for small objects already in place. We've already purchased that. We have a contract out with Inception Scanning for very large format objects, like very, very large maps or paintings. Or that is, there was a quote, I believe, attached to the application for Inception Scanning, which is almost $4,000 of the $8,500. But I believe we are okay on what else we have to scan. In terms of 3D objects, that is actually in need of just we have cameras that we use, we have lights, we have a small light box, we may need a larger one. We have some backdrops to set up dress forms, so mounted and dressed dress forms for the textiles. Flat textiles we can use either on a table or attached to a background. So it appears that just the large format scanning is all we need at this point. And that's, like I said, it's attached as a quote.
Susie?
I just have one last question. The total cost for this year is $20,000. What's in that 11.5? I can come up with the 8,500 because that's the upgrade and scanning items that are going out to Inception Technologies, and $1,500 for the boxes and whatnot. What's in that 11.5?
I believe part of it, that is our own funding. You know, that's our portion. And I believe that part of that is our payment to our interns, that their salaries that we pay. And I'm sorry, but I don't know what the rest of it is. I'm sorry, Glenn had to leave, but he would probably know that.
Okay, so the 8,500 is for everything that you need to get going.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about how you how confident are you in your future fundraising? Fundraising, as you know, is not easy. I'm a trustee of the Richard Sparrow House in Plymouth, which is the oldest house in town. We're trying to raise funds now, and it's quite difficult, even with our singular historic significance within the town of Plymouth. But we're not looking at doing it year after year after year after year for 10 years. You do run into eventually the law of diminishing returns. If you're always going to the well for contributions, those start to slack off after a while. Of the 8,500 or the 11,500, have you started to try to raise funds for this project? And how has that gone?
Gee, I wish Glenn were here because that's his forte. Have we started? We are planning to do, I've only been with Cohasset for a couple of years. My understanding is that they had a very successful clam bake every year, which raised significant funds. And due to COVID, of course, that couldn't take place over the past 2 years. And that is planned for this September. So that is a significant amount of funds that comes in from that. We're also planning an exhibit in late December, early January, probably early January, which was similar to a program we did for the Downton Abbey launch, which was a few years back, 16, I think. We're doing that again for the Gilded Age, and that will be dinners, teas, private tours. So we're hoping that will be successful as well. And I believe there may be a request once more to membership and beyond for just our annual fundraising. I'm sorry I can't be more specific. Glenn probably has more information in his back pocket.
Sure. Because in the past, there has been not a significant contribution towards CPC projects on behalf of the Historical Society. In some cases, we've done a lot of 100% financing. Recently, I think there was one where there was 15, maybe 20% that the Historical Society picked up. And that was the largest contribution from the Historical Society in the 12 years I've been on this committee. I'm just wondering, 10 years, raising $25,000 a year, how confident are you that you're going to be able to do that? And as Tom had asked, will you be relying on CPC to constantly be contributing to it?
Mm-hmm. I think Glenn made it clear that we were not going to be relying every year on CPC money for this project. We certainly will be relying on our fundraising activities. We do write other grants, but I'm afraid, again, I am not very well equipped to answer financial questions. That is Glenn's forte. Okay. So I apologize.
No problem. That just is a concern to me. If the past has been any indicator, we could be finding ourselves in a position of having to increasingly add more and more and more and more to what is a private organization in the end. That is a big concern to me. Anyone else have any questions? Mary Ann.
Russ, I noticed in 2012 that the CPC provided about $37,000 to the Historic Society for preserving documents and historic artifacts. So
right.
I haven't requested in a long time, but I am concerned about if they'll be coming back year after year. Should this be rewritten to be a larger funding project?
Sorry, I really can't answer that. I do know, I did hear Glenn say that that may not be the case, probably would not be the case. Doesn't sound fair to me to be the case. But if there is any way that I can express those concerns to him and have him get back to the committee. He will be back in town tomorrow evening, and perhaps he can address those questions. I can let him know.
We would have to schedule another meeting, which we'll probably have to do for next Monday anyway. But that I think is a big concern. Saying that you'll be able to do it and doing it, two vastly different things.
Yes, understood.
And that's from my own personal experience at Sparrow. You know, it's kind of biblical. Many are called, but few are chosen. Many offer, but not everybody coughs it up when it's time to come up with the money. So that I think is a big concern on my part. Anyway. Susie?
I'm not comfortable with the vagueness of we'll get the money somehow. If there were an event, I mean, a big event, not one of the small ones, with a stated goal, or if the society had gone out to the public and said, this is the project that we're looking to fund, help us out. But right now it seems that it's either internal or CPC that will do the funding. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I think it's about time for the society to have a major fundraising plan. And I've been on CPC for a while now, and there have been a lot of requests. I think I don't have any problem with this one. I think it's a fabulous idea. I'm concerned about other projects coming down the pike that the Historical Society will be looking for funding. And without a major push to get the society on solid footing, this particular project may be just a tad premature. I don't know what your other obligations are, but you haven't been open for a couple of years, so I would imagine the maintenance costs and the overhead, those are getting up there. That's the first thing. I suggest that you come back with a concrete plan for the fundraising you're planning on doing, and to let us know what grants you've applied for and how they've been received. I know there are grants out there for this sort of thing, and some of them are quite generous. And that's about all I have to say. I think it's a terrific idea. I think it may be just a tad too ambitious at this stage in time. And also, I'm afraid, without knowing where you expect to get your funding and have some other commitments, that CPC could end up being on the hook, whether it's done partially, I'm talking about the project, or in various stages. And you're looking at a lot of years down the pike. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I could support it in its present request.
Yeah, I'd like to see something in the terms of showing a budget and a plan to set aside, because you have not just the digitization. As Susie pointed out in the beginning, we received 3-4 times requests for work on the cupola and other parts of the building, and there were no funds available for that, which makes me concerned about raising funds for this. What happens to projects like that? Is all of that money going to go into the digitization at the cost to the rest of the building? That would be, it's pretty insurmountable to me anyway. Tom, you were going to say something?
Susie got it. I was going to ask for a plan of how this is going to be funded in writing, so that we don't talk about it, and it looks over the cost of the project overall over 10 years. And you know, that would be very helpful to see what the plan is and how realistic it is. So thank you.
Jenny?
Yeah, that was my initial point in saying that if you use this first year to craft a model of the project as it goes from year 1 to year 10, and include enough of your collections, and send some representatives up to talk to the various granting agencies to see what they're looking for. That might help you to begin to secure alternative funding.
Mary Ann,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Shoot. Am I on? Oh, the committee has mentioned the cupola a couple times. I'm just trying to understand this. So under our CPC projects, it's listed as the Paul Pratt Library Cupola Restoration twice. Is this really really mislabeled and should be the Cohasset Historical Society? Is that what this is referenced to?
What's it listed
the Paul
as?
Pratt Library. Right now it's listed as the Paul Pratt Library Cupola Restoration at the town library. And
Maybe
this
it was.
Are you really, is this really mentioning, or this really should be is this mislabeled as the Historical Society? Just so I better understand the amount of money that has been provided over the years to the Historical Society.
The amount of money to the Historical Society, the only other entity that has received more CPC funding is the town. A few years ago, I went through the CPC listing, and Historical Society has gotten probably around $800,000 to $900,000 over the years.
Mary Ann,
800, yes.
I believe that cupola is for the library, the old Ripley Road School, the library. That cupola.
Okay.
When they moved it, that one needed restoration. The one I was.
They both
referring to,
needed
the one
restoration then.
on the Pratt building, the Historical Society building, that cupola had come up within the last couple of years as needing funds.
Well, I think we did a partial restoration on when we used headquarters versus library. But on the headquarters, there was some work that was done. There were leaks or something that was of pressing importance. And then subsequently, they've come back for more work on that particular cupola. But one of those cupolas is for the old Paul Pratt Library. There was, I think one of them will mention a weather vane being restored.
Oh, maybe this is one too, the Paul Pratt Memorial Library, restore the Old Town map. And that's
right. That's the library. That's the library. And that, actually, that should have been was that Historical Commission, Susie? That map? Oh no, that came from the library, that request.
Okay.
Peter Wood.
I'm just trying to understand the funding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's good.
They got a kitty cat.
It was a map that Peter's family had donated to the town, to the library, because they wanted it to be on display. So the library made the request through the town, and we made the grant to restore the map.
And that map is in the library that exists now, we're talking about, as opposed to the historic. Okay, I'm sorry. I just really want to understand these numbers.
No, there's no need to apologize. You know, I mean, if you were on the board for 10 years, yeah, okay, you should have remembered it. But you haven't been. So don't ever apologize for asking a question.
Then that makes, okay, thank you.
You can go online and get a complete list of all of the projects that have been funded by the Cohasset CPC over the years.
I have that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the labeling on that is pretty funky, so I can see where Mary Ann would have a question as to what one is what. Do you have a cat, Mary Ann?
I do. Would you all like to meet her?
Yes. I saw her jump over the. Yeah, sure. Bring her
Kathy
up.
the cat.
Oh.
And she really wants to be part of this meeting. So.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised she's not laying on the keyboard.
She doesn't know economics, though.
Cat?
Is it a Maine Coon? I think she's a tabby cat.
Okay, she's a cat.
Yeah.
Jane.
I grew up in a house that I thought was built in 1690. And then my sister, who's an amateur historian, went to the Hingham Archives and discovered all of the scandalous things that had happened, including that it was probably built in 1650. And that the condition of the house was that Hingham's first lawyer had to allow his mother-in-law to live with him for the rest of his life as a condition of getting that house. And so there's just such interesting stuff in those archives. So I'm a huge fan of this project because I think there'll be equally interesting things that are unearthed in Cohasset's archives for all of posterity. If I may suggest, though, it sounds like maybe what we want to do is have a bit more concrete of a plan, including alternative funding sources for the future, maybe for next meeting, Russ, to help move this along, so that, you know, Mitch Legg can report back to Mr. Pratt about the vibe of the group and the open questions, and then, you know, see where they want to go from there.
The only thing I disagree with you on it, Gene, is the timing. I don't think it will be ready for our next meeting. Is going to be next Monday. Maybe next town meeting, you mean. But I don't think this is, just from my own experience at Sparrow, this is nothing you're going to be able to pull together in a matter of a week or two.
Well, maybe if the information is already there, then they come back. If it's not and they need more time, then they know they need more time for a fall meeting.
Yeah, if you can let me know by, well, not to give you short notice, but I need to know by Thursday at noon. So I'd have sufficient time to post a meeting within the 48-hour limit that's imposed on those. Tom, were you ready to ask something?
Yes, I was trying to spare you my ringing phone. But I was just, is that the only item that would be on the agenda, or would we be having a meeting anyway?
There is the potential, yeah, we have, the Housing Authority is going to be coming in with 2 proposals. The town may be coming in with a proposal for some work on Milliken Field, although it appears that's something that we had funded a couple of years ago. So yeah, that wouldn't be the only thing on the agenda.
So could we not put the item on the agenda, and if they're not prepared, we can just pull it at the last minute?
Oh yeah, I can do that, no problem. But I'd prefer to be able to post on Thursday and have that be what we're going to do rather than withdraw. But we can withdraw. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that things have been canceled just before a meeting. So I'll put it on the agenda.
I was just thinking if Glenn is away, asking him to have a plan by when, does he have a plan by Wednesday or not? I think you give him a couple more days and then pull it if it's not adequate, but whatever you decide.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine by me. Paul.
I think we've kept this schlag long enough. We don't have Glenn here. So maybe if we just kind of wrap up this portion of it, not to say anything, they know what they've got to come back with. So it's kind of entirely on them. I think it's a fantastic project. I do agree they should have their ducks in a row. But I just don't think we're doing Ms. Schlag any favors by belaboring it when we don't have Mr. Pratt here who can answer the questions that we're really interested.
I don't think it's a matter of belaboring it, because I think we're just at that point now where we're going to be saying, you know, get these things together and we'll talk again.
No, I'm not saying that in a bad way, Russ. I just say without Mr. Pratt here who can answer the questions, that would probably set us to straights. That's all I was saying. There's no bad ground intended.
No, none taken either. Jenny.
To me, this is a pretty small amount of money, and I think we've made the point that alternative funding does need to be looked at. And I don't see any reason why we can't fund this project for this year.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? Do you want to make a motion, Jenny, or?
I move that we fund the project for this year at the requested amount.
Anyone
so they
want
can
a
get
second?
started.
Do I have a second? Hearing none, you would say we're hopefully get something done next Monday. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you very much. I will report back to Glenn and hopefully we'll have that information and ready and we will let you know about the agenda by
Okay.
Thursday PM, correct?
well, no, I'll put it on the agenda. Tom's point was a good one. You know, we'll put it on the agenda. But I mean, if you can let me know still, even if
Yes.
it's Friday, I can at least tell everybody, okay, here's what we're actually going to hear.
Will
Okay.
do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. You do the
Okay.
same. Good night.
We have the harbor master. I don't know if Tracy is Lori in?
I do not see her name. I don't know if she's under a different name.
Okay.
Let's see.
Lori, if you're working on an alias.
Just
let
ask her to
us
raise,
know.
Lori, if you can raise your hand, that would be great.
I don't think she's there. You know, we can hear this one tonight. We can wait until Lori's. This is a pretty easy one. It's $15,000 to paint the engineering building on Government Island. That is to the right of the lighthouse keepers as you face the lightkeepers house.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it was part of the original cluster of buildings that were involved in making building Minot Light. It's on the National Register, or is it all just in national places?
No, it's in the National Register of Historic
It is on
Places.
the
It's part of
register.
the Government Island Historic District.
Yeah, there was, you know, those circles that you see at Government Island. Those are templates that they built the lighthouse off of. In front of the sailing club, there's a little shed that's included in that cluster of buildings where they kept the oil for the lamps. The engineer's shed, and I think that was it. So you want to do it tonight? I mean, yeah, it's 8:45. I have no problem waiting until next week. I like meetings that are shorter than.
Excuse me, Russ.
Yes.
So she is here. She's on a phone. So she's able to hear you right now.
Oh,
I'm gonna
okay.
give her she's just on a phone. Okay.
Ah,
Laurie, you can
okay.
speak if you need to.
All right. Lori, anything you want?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, Lori.
How you doing?
We're fine.
Yeah, this is the building to the right of Lightkeepers. That's used as the storage building for various equipment for the harbor department. And it was painted about, I'd say about 14 years ago, 12, 14 years ago. And we got a bargain deal. And you know when you get a bargain deal, what you get. So it's in need of paint now, starting to peel. And there's a couple of rotted clapboards and a couple of windowsills, which would all be covered under, the painting company will do that. It's the same company that painted Town Hall, Fox Painting.
Oh, good.
I make a motion that we support.
Could I speak for a minute?
Yeah, but I said on the
I was trying to prevent that.
Just a couple of things. One, that was the first building that was constructed when the new Monot's Light was being built. So it's got a lot of great historic relevance. I would ask that, Laurie, I don't have a problem with voting it tonight, but could you just run it by the Historical Commission, just so they know that it's being done? I think just an email would be enough to Jackie. I don't think it needs any more than that. I'm very pleased to hear that the same company who did Town Hall is doing this one because it's on the National Register and it's getting funds from CPC. It has to adhere to the guidelines for the Department of the Interior, which on the surface of it seems like it will if you're using those painters, because that would have had to comply. I think it's great, and I thank you for doing it.
Lori,
Okay, good.
is this being bid under the prevailing wage law for town-owned property?
I'm assuming it is. They've done other bids with, the town. They've done, other buildings, so they know the
Okay.
rules.
Can you double check? Is, just as
Sure.
you said, when you get the cheap price, you know what you get. And you know the old saying of what happens when you assume. So if you can assume,
Right.
or if you can get them, but I would still have no problem going ahead with this tonight. So we have them. Jean,
What color are you gonna paint it?
The same color it is now. I'm not changing any colors.
Okay, it's not the town hall color, right? No offense to the town hall. I just don't want to see that color again.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not
You
a
have my
cream color.
vote.
It's sort of a grayish
Is it a
white.
grayish?
yeah.
Yeah, grayish white, I'd
Okay.
say.
Does it have a red roof? Like Coast Guard
Yes, it does.
places? It does, okay.
Yep.
All right, yeah, I figured. Okay, anyone else have anything? Paul, Mary Ann,
Lori, when's your project gonna start? Anticipated.
Whenever they can do it. Probably in the fall when it's, not quite so humid up there, but I don't know when.
But
I had
it's for
wanted
this year-
it, we, go ahead.
For this year then, the anticipation.
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Thank you.
definitely this year.
okay, anyone else? We have a motion on the table from Tom to approve.
Second,
Second, all in favor, we'll have to roll call. Mary Ann,
Mary Ann Weatherald, aye.
Jean,
Jean Haley Dippledy.
Mr. Paul. I could read your lips, but you're muted.
Paul Grady, aye.
Okay, thanks. Tom,
Tom Reardon, aye.
Mike,
Michael Dickey, aye.
Ginny. No, we can read your lips again there, but unmute yourself, please. You're still muted.
Yeah.
There. We're gonna say yes. Susie, oh,
It says you Wadsworth, aye.
okay. And I will vote aye as well. Okay, we have Jeff Wall is back. I asked him to come back for the Drynham property. Didn't have a name, I don't think, when it was first presented. What they are looking for, I know people are wondering what kind of repairs and everything else they do. And the real purpose of this request is a conservation restriction on the property, which we do on all the properties. We've had, I can't count the number of grants we've done with the Conservation Trust. People had some concerns about engineering studies and different things like that, which we can easily incorporate into a motion to at least let this transaction get finished. The town picks up for the money that they're getting, besides an improved trail plan, we get a permanent restriction and the property will never be developed. It adds recreation to the town. It adds wildlife protection to the town. It's a very good project. Cohasset Conservation Trust takes extremely good care of their properties. And I would like to be able to get something through tonight where we don't have to be putting this off any longer and them potentially having to have the deal go south on them. So anyone have any questions towards to Jeff or John? Actually, John and Jeff, you need to state your names and address.
I'm Jeff Wall, 36 Old Pasture Road, and a director in the Cohasset Conservation Trust.
John?
I'm John Madden. I'm at 60 Forest Ave in Cohasset. I'm also a director of the trust.
Okay.
I'd like to point out that this is the third project that we've brought before the Community Preservation Committee. One was Ingram Park, where we received a grant for $175,000 in return for a conservation restriction. And the second one was the Salerno property that we're working on right now for $450,000 in return for a conservation restriction. So this is in line with the other ones that we've already had before the CPC.
And we had agreed to one on Fox Run that for whatever reason never ended up going through, but it's not the first dance with the Conservation Trust. You know, people who have been on that board have really proven their dedication to both the environment and the town, and it's a great benefit to the town. Jean.
I apologize for asking what may be a stupid question, but from what I understand, you're seeking $175,000 in CPC funds, and the purpose is for a conservation restriction. Is this to purchase the land? I can't imagine that.
No, this is to permanently protect the land. Right now, this is a buildable lot. It has an approved septic system, it has frontage, and it has access. And it was appraised for $350,000. We've already acquired the property, and we're not allowed to get reimbursed on money that we've already spent. But this is for conservation restriction that will permanently restrict the property.
I'm on.
Okay, so you've already acquired the property, spent the 300, and now you want to spend how much in order to do the conservation restriction? Well, like what part of the 175 is?
It's when we did the application a year ago, we had set out a plan to do work just within the property itself for trails, a kiosk, stairways, boardwalks for $70,000. This extends beyond that because we're thinking about connecting this property with our bread and cheese property, which is down at Fox Run. And we're going to have to go through town land, and there are other wetlands and stuff. But this money in itself is for the conservation restriction, and we're going to use it for the proposed projects that we're talking about.
This is kind of like somebody having been in the mortgage business back when it was somewhat reputable. It's like somebody who owns a house with no mortgage on it, coming in to refinance it to do improvements to the house. In this case, they're sitting on, if you go by the sales price, they're sitting on 50% equity. If you go on the value of acreage, that amount buildable in Cohasset, they're looking for a fraction of the value of it. So that is one of the ways I've been looking at it as well. Susie, you have something?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jean, does that answer your question?
I still don't have a clear understanding of how the money breaks down, which was important to me, but thank you.
Well, no, I'd like, to make sure you do understand where it's coming from and what it's going to. it's going to be, the money is going to give us, the town, a restriction on the property. They're going to be taking that money and doing improvements to the property, which really will fall to the benefit of the town in recreation and other ways. I assume that any money left over and above what they're doing will eventually go into other properties, and continue the history that they've had. And Mary Ann.
This was the property that we were talking about just recently, and weren't we, there was a concern about, this is the right property, about traffic on Forest Ave and accessing it from, because the more attention that we provide to it and the more upgrades, such as I believe it was the boardwalks, the more attractive it becomes and more people would want to come. So I wonder if that was addressed, the concern for parking. I know there was discussion of cutouts on Forest Avenue for people, and they would have to walk down to it. But I think that was a big issue for me for this property.
The properties that we own have very little parking. Great Brewster Woods, which is behind Town Hall, has, I believe, 2 parking spaces available, and people walk to it. And they also park at Town Hall, but they walk up the street, up Highland Avenue, and then up Great Brewster Trail. The Ingram property that we have on Norman Todd Road and Beechwood Street has no parking available. It gets a lot of pedestrian traffic from neighbors. Some people park at the triangle at Norman Todd Road and Beechwood Street, but you can only park 1 car there. And the same kind of thing would happen at this place. You get the neighbors, you get walkers. People go out for a walk. I assume there's a good sidewalk there, and I think people walk the sidewalk a lot to go down to Black Rock Beach. So I don't think parking is going to be a problem.
I live near the property, and Jeff's right. We do have the sidewalk there. There's a fair amount of traffic already that's just going by this property. People just go in the morning and the evenings walking. There's also what's called Heather Lane, which is one of the cutouts. It's pretty close. It's really, you could see the entrance. You'd be able to see the entrance to the property from Heather Lane, and there would be parking on Heather Lane if people wanted to do that.
That answer your concerns, Mary Ann?
Well, I just think no, I do know Forest Ave quite well, and I'm close to it as well, and I know where Heather Lane is and the abutters. Budding, I just think it's challenging. It's a very challenging road, and you're bringing to attention these vernal pools and new places. I just think it will be well traveled, and I am concerned about the children and the walkers and the sidewalks, and it's just a very busy road. That's what it is. It's very busy.
Okay. Susie?
No, as usual, I want to know what other projects might be coming down the pike, and whether funding this one is at the expense of funding a different one for the Conservation Trust.
Well, I mean, predicting the future is rather tough to do. If you could do it, I'd come up with a lottery number for this week. I assume there will be other projects.
No, I'm talking about, I'm sorry, Russ, I'm talking about at the present time, not somewhere down the road, but I do have one other question. Last week, we talked about the amount of money that was being asked, and some of us had trouble coming up with how you got to 175 from 120 or so.
175. The property was, the property was appraised for $350,000. And I figured asking for $175,000 for a conservation restriction is 50% of that. And it's kind of sharing the burden. You know, we're a
Okay.
conservation organization, but the town gets a conservation restriction. And before
All right.
we acquired the property, I'd like to point out that that property was assessed for $423,000.
That's not my question, Jeff.
Okay.
There were a number of items that were included in that application.
Yep.
And then you've also talked about connecting it to the bread and cheese property. I don't have a problem with voting for the funding. I just want to make sure that we're voting for the right description.
Well, that's why I revised the application.
Okay,
And the description is for a conservation restriction.
perfect. Thank you.
In the case of the Ingram property, and Jeff and John, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we bought a conservation restriction on that. And I don't recall it was in exchange for any work to be done to the property, though quite a bit was, but it was just to conserve the land itself. The way I'm looking at this one personally is that we're getting a restriction to build the land. In exchange for that restriction, the outfall of that restriction will be an improved piece of land that will offer more opportunity to the recreation and the general public. Ginny? No? Michael?
I'm good with it.
You know, I kind of mentioned, I'm getting a sign that my internet connection is a little unstable. I'm not sure how well you can hear me. Apologies in advance. But, you know, I guess, you know, that road is, people travel down that road pretty quickly. And so I'm concerned about a lack of parking. And if there's a lack of parking, I'm just not sure how much it's going to be used. And so I guess, yeah, I'm just, you know, I hate to say, you know, how much for how much, but, you know, if it's not going to be highly used because people are not wanting to park there because of the high speed, you know, down Forest Hills, just wondering if you know, it makes a whole lot of money or it makes a whole lot of sense to spend a whole lot of money on a facility that's just going to be lightly used. If there's specific elements that kind of need to be done to protect the habitat and need to be done to make it safe, I think I can be, you know, supportive of that, but kind of, you know, spending money to get a gold-plated facility when people aren't really going to be using it because there's no parking, you know, that kind of an equation's not so attractive in my mind. But
Have you traveled down Beechwood Street lately? Yeah, that's a very heavily, Beechwood Street's a very heavily traveled road also. And our Ingram property gets, you know, pretty good traffic.
I'm not gonna argue with you.
Okay.
And you know, like we said earlier, Michael, too, there's a fair amount of people that will be just walking by the property just because of the traffic that's already there. And so that's not parking, but just people that are out doing their normal daily walks and they'll be going by it. So that they'll have an opportunity to go in.
I'm in favor, in theory, of, you know, creating more open space and access for, you know, the you know, citizens of this town and visitors. So, you know, I'm not against the project per se. I'm just a little bit of, you know, cost benefit, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the cost benefits is the benefit to the town, not just in recreation, but in terms of development. which is a big concern with a lot of people in town. You look at some of the big houses that have gone up on Jerusalem Road. There's a certain benefit of that involved with this as well. Susie, sorry.
I just want to address the parking. Cohasset is the walkingest town I have ever seen. People walk everywhere. Old people, young people. Again, everybody seems to walk. I don't see the parking as big an issue on Forest Avenue as it could be in some other town, because people walk. And they'll walk to it rather than park, use it as a destination. They'll just walk from wherever they are.
All right, someday I'll forget to, or won't forget to unmute. Jean, anything else you'd like to add?
I share Mike's concerns.
Mary Ann?
No, I have the same concerns. I'm very supportive of the conservation. In fact, I volunteered for a long time on it, so I'm very familiar with the properties in Beechwood. I just know when you put in boardwalks and walkways, lots of kids, brownies want to go, and they want to walk. They'll probably park and walk over, and you'll bring a lot of attention to it. I'm just concerned about the safety factor, and maybe that's more of a concern about Forest Ave on a separate note of how to better monitor that road. But that's just one part of purchasing, or you already own this property, but putting this conservation restriction on it is my concern of safety of people getting to it. That's it.
Tom?
I basically support the concept. I must say, though, I have a philosophical issue that I keep struggling with in these projects, that we take public funds and put them into projects that have very limited public use, except in the broadest sense, that it improves the overall quality of the space in the town. But, you know, they are by and large not very accessible only to people who live right near them, accessible people only who can walk to them. And I'm not sure we shouldn't have a little bit broader sense of what we're doing here, whether we want something that's encouraging recreation and participation, or are we trying to get these little enclaves that are fairly precious. So, well, I will support this. I also think there's an underlying, each time these come up, I keep thinking when we were looking on the project that was off off Atlantic Avenue, that little island. And yet it was going to be accessible to 2 cars at most. And it strikes me, we ought to get greater clarity about whether we're doing recreation or what we're just doing with these things when we're using public funds.
In the case of James Island, it was more than just the 2 spots that caused that one to be withdrawn, actually. The abutters wanted to restrict access from an hour after sunrise to an hour before sunset. They would not allow any animals, dogs on a leash, and along with being a walking town, Cohasset certainly is a dog town. There were a number of issues that the neighbors were adamant to the point where they withdrew the application.
Parking, Russ, parking is only one obstacle to public use. So
Right.
I didn't mean to be focusing only on parking. It's the kind of argument that we preserve lands that are inaccessible for various reasons. And maybe that's good, but we're also into the recreation business. So I'm just saying that we ought to be, I'd love to get a little bit more clarity of when we put public money into these things, what are we trying to achieve?
Okay. All right. Ginny?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
All right, Paul?
I share Gene's concern and Michael's as well. Yeah, spending town funds, and I'm all for conservation, so I'll go along with Mary Ann. This one's kind of a dichotomy. But I am concerned. Forest Avenue is a busy road. The parking's probably at a minute. My concern is expending town funds for a beautification project to a degree for a limited few. Because what happens after it's done? Then you come up, you're gonna see the roadway lined with cars. I don't think so, because I don't think the infrastructure is really there. So, as I said, I'm all for conservation. But town funds on a project that's, again, I think may benefit just a select few. That concerns me a little bit, so I have to go on that premise. Again, that's why I share Gene's concern, Michael's concern, and to a degree, Tom's concern.
Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? No? Does anybody want to make a motion? Do you want to put this to another meeting?
What would happen if we don't vote for it?
What do you mean? You mean don't hold a vote at all? Or we vote it down?
Or we vote it down?
I would assume, well, nothing will happen to us. You know? We'll still have 175.
But what happens to the Conservation Trust? What happens to the property?
Well, we'll have
If
to
there's
take a
no
look at,
restriction on it.
but then it doesn't have a conservation restriction on it. I guess we're free to do with it.
But
as we want.
you own it.
We own
The
it.
trust owns it.
Right.
Correct.
They could sell it. They could sell it to raise money to buy other properties. You know, obviously with the restriction, you couldn't, but they'd be free to do what they want with it. It's their property. Paul?
No,
You had to, oh, okay. There was a gold frame around you. I thought that meant you wanted to say something.
I'm good,
My
thank
bad. Huh? Okay, so do we have a motion or no? I would say no. Okay, do you want to take another shot at it at another time? Or do you want to just kill it entirely? We gotta do one or the other. We're getting into the late hours of the night for an old guy like me. Paul?
I think if they come back with another presentation or something like that, I wouldn't want to kick something to the curb right away. But again, what's to make it attractive for the town? You know, the parking, safety, what's going to be a draw? You know, again, besides the neighbors, abutters, people that live on Forest Avenue, it's just not, to me, I drive down Forest Avenue. I very rarely stop on it. You know, that's about the size of it. What justifies the expenditure? So maybe if they can come back with a different presentation or something a little more robust, we could revisit it. That would be my thought.
Okay.
Plus, if you want a motion, I'd make a motion that we table this for the indefinite future and let them come back, and people meanwhile can think about what they think about it.
I would second that.
Yeah.
Okay. We do a roll call vote. Jenny?
Jenny Najmi, aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Jean?
Jeannie Lee Dippledy.
Tom?
Tom Reardon, aye.
Mary Ann?
Mary Ann Weatherall, aye.
Michael?
Mike Dickey, aye.
Susie?
Susie Wadsworth, aye.
Okay, I'm voting nay. It's not that unusual from other projects we've done. I just, no, it fits in what we've done in the past. I'll let it go at that. So it's 7, or no, yeah, 7 throws me off having you Tom and, or Jeff and John there. So there's what, 8 of us, right? 7-1. Okay. That's it for tonight. Does any member have any comments on anything?
We're meeting next Monday.
Yeah, we've got a couple things from the town. Dom's gonna come in and show us our balances and all. Jean?
You read my mind. I was literally just going to ask if we could see the updated balances, including in the categories. The full run.
Yeah. I just want to say goodnight, guys, and thank you. Nice to meet you, and thanks for considering our request.
Okay, John. Thank
Okay,
you.
take care. Bye.
Paul?
I just say, well, he's off the air right now, but his project isn't over. It's just a matter if they come back with something making it more attractive. I think everybody's in consensus here that we're for conservation. So that's, I don't think it's a lost cause.
What about the idea of actually selling the property and finding something more appropriate?
Well, first off, we've already made a vote, so we can't continue to deliberate. If they want to come back, they come back. That's about all I can say on it.
Do you like a motion to adjourn?
If no one has any more comments and there's no public comments, I'd love a motion to adjourn. And if anyone votes no, I'm coming over to your house and watch it. Okay.
Hi, Marianne, whether I'll make a motion to adjourn and close this meeting.
I second.
Okay. All right, so we'll vote it. Ginny?
Ginny, aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Susie?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
I bet you're going to vote aye too, Marianne. Fire away.
I support my motion.
Good. I'll support Marianne's motion. Thank you very much, folks.